The apparition of July 13th, Our Lady warned the seers of Fatima that if people did not stop offending God, the whole world would be punished by war, hunger, and persecution of the church and the Pope. Russia would be the instrument of this chastisement. Now, so from the outset, this clearly indicates that Russia, which is not yet, I'm trying to remember the exact date, this is prior to the Bolshevik Revolution, right? And as Mary goes on to supposedly, right, Russia will spread her errors, she says, okay? And if the Pope doesn't act to consecrate Russia, then there will be war and Russia will spread her errors. Now, what is the origin of Marxism? That's it presumably would be the errors here, right? Is it Russia? No. Where does Marxism come from? Oh, England. Why did Mary leave out this convenient detail that the errors of Russia are exported to Russia via England and the banks of England, the bankers of the West? And I've read Warburg's letters where he brags about this. But she forgot to mention this. But it happens to fit into geopolitically what the Western elite at this time wanted. Isn't that interesting? So who stands to gain here? Well, this is actually what the Western elite had planned. And so this just miraculously doesn't mention that Marx and Engels is the wealthy stock owner in England who funds Marx and his errors. Marxism is exported to Russia as a weapon by the Western power elite on record. Go read Anthony Sutton, Professor Anthony Sutton. But no, it's the errors of Russia that then spread to them. So this is a calculated geopolitical move that makes Russia the bad guy when Russia is the object of the West's psychological warfare and destruction via Bolshevism, you see. Now, then I go on to talk about, in my own experience, in various SSPX, traditional chapels, FSSP too. I attended all kinds of Latin masses when I was a traditional Catholic. I wasn't just in the SSPX. Sometimes I went to FSSP masses. Still have friends in the FSSP. And I'm not trying to be unfair or mean to Roman Catholics. It's just an assessment of this world. In my experience, many of the trad Catholics knew more about Fatima. They could tell you the ins and outs, all the arcana and the lore of Fatima. But they couldn't tell you what was in Exodus. And for me, this is a huge disconnect here. Okay, so if we move way away from Exodus, don't even know like what's in Exodus 23, right? Why that's an important text. Why is Exodus 3 really important? But they could tell you all the lore, the arcana, every little conspiracy theory about how Sister Lucy was replaced in the 1960s and there's a body double. I mean, I'm not joking. Like, this is an actual traditionalist conspiracy theory that Sister Lucy was replaced. And so, I mean, it gets so ridiculous, right? Like, the whole thing just happens to match up with, as I said, what the Western elite wanted. Read Tragic Hope. And these so-called revelations line up with the Western power elite. And so it goes on to talk about the World War. And it says at the end, I'm quoting Quigley here, at the end of 1914, it became clear that the organization of this system had to be greatly extended. He's talking about the elite of the West. Once again, the task was entrusted to Lord Curtis, Lionel Curtis, who established in England and East Dominion a front for this secret society, the Round Table Group. This front organization is called the Royal Institute for International Affairs. The Round Table groups became the model for the banking clique elite. In America, it was eventually titled the Council on Foreign Relations, the Front for J.P. Morgan, etc., etc. This is the Milner Group. And so it goes on to talk about how in the 20th century, right, what's the whole point of Tragic Hope? The two rivals to the Anglo-American establishment would have to be destroyed. And that was the goal of the two world wars and the Cold War, to destroy the Austro-Hungarian Empire and to destroy Russia. That's it. That's what the two world wars did. And that was their goal from the time period of the Great Game. So when you go and study the history of the Great Game, which involved all kinds of subterfuge deception, psyops. I don't know why the internet's being so slow here, but the great strategic rivalry between the British Empire and the Russian Empire back to the 1840s, struggling for supremacy in Central Asia. The classic Great Grand Period, generally regarded as running approximate to the Russo-Persian Treaty of 1813 and the Anglo-Russian Convention of 1907. At least intensive phase, a less intensive phase followed the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. So you see, this is known as Great Game 1. And this plays all the way, actually this plays all the way up into present day geopolitics, right? With the Heartland Theory and the Rimland Theory, Mackinder, and everything that we covered in my recent video, Liberal Imperium. And so if you know about Great Game, oh, actually, then I have a better approach to understanding how Fatima is a geopolitical tool. Just like EMJ understands Medjugorje. Trads, are you listening? How does EMJ understand Medjugorje? In exactly the same way, but arbitrarily, no, Fatima doesn't count. Okay, even though it's the exact same model of geopolitical tool, PSYOP, I know it doesn't count. Supposedly, Mary says, I will come and ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart. If you do what I say, it will be converted and the world will have peace. Now, again, why doesn't the Pope just do this? I mean, it's just like, I'm supposed to throw out just really simple common sense reasoning. And I need to read, what, hundreds of pages of Roman Catholics coping and reinterpreting and doing. Do you know who Harold Camping is? Does everybody know who Harold Camping is? Okay, maybe we need to look at this, because I don't see any significant difference between Harold Camping, I'll play the CNN report here, and what goes on with Fatima. And I know this is a goofy evangelical goober, but how is the Roman Catholic approach to this any different?
He was the preacher behind those end of the world predictions.
97% of the people God will destroy.
I don't believe in such
Judgment days that kept coming and going.
I like that. I like that Australian rationalist. Oh, I believe it's so shit.
The world did not end. We are still...
But now the world has ended for Harold Camping long after he predicted it would. Predictions so wrong that he once said reporters would be thinking,
I'm ready to shoot myself or go on a booze trip.
he was wrong in 1994, and again when he announced the end would come May 21st, 2011. One follower spent $140,000 on ads warning
$140,000 on ads that Judgment Day will happen in May 21st, dude. Oh, man. Bro, you got freaking conned, dude. Now, it doesn't really look like Harold Camp. Maybe he was rich. I mean, I can't really tell if this old geezer really believed this. Like he really thought he was like, or is he just a good old fashioned con man? I mean, it's hard to tell, but if this poor guy dropped $140,000 on pamphlets, I'm willing to bet maybe Harold Camping had a bunch of money. Now, wait a minute. Now, it seems like I read his Wikipedia. Seems like he did have a bunch of money, now that I think about it. Because I read something about him. Now, I'm not saying that Fatima is identical to this. I'm saying the principle is the same, right? So we all look at Harold Camping and we say, ha, 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 doomsday guru, what a goober. How many boomers did he con out of thousands and millions of dollars, right? But the modus operandi for a Roman Catholic about Fatima is no different. That's what I'm trying to say. And Fatima does relate to, like, I mean, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but it kind of has this apocalyptic connotation to it because of the supposed predictions of the world wars and everyone dying, and basically everybody goes to hell, right? So the point is, if you remember what we discussed in the first hour about epistemology, notice does Harold Camping and his followers, do they follow the evidences when the failed predictions don't line up? No, they revise the story, reinterpret, give a new date, thus megacope, right? They just injected a massive dose of cope. That's it. Just reinterpret. The doomsday cope, right? That's the point that's being made here. And what this shows is that people don't just look at the evidences. I just follow the evidences, right? Humans don't work this way. Epistemology doesn't work this way. That's the point. And I just hope you get that these are classic examples of this, right? Just like in the stories we gave with Mark, just like the ape pope in Planet of the Apes, just like the doomsday cult people from Harold Camping.
Judgment Day, that's your life savings.
A good chunk of it.
A documentary filmmaker followed Robert Fitzpatrick to Times Square to ring in the end of the world. And of course, nothing happened.
I didn't
Like, who would... he's out there signing autographs, dude. He looks like a dang... like Bill Gates' right-hand coder. And he's out there signing autographs. Look at these guys.
my planks. I didn't do the dishes before I left. I didn't expect to be going back home.
And though you felt sorry for some who believed, it was hard not to mock. But this is my birthday. To put this on me is just weird.
Happy Doomsday, dear Genie.
The rapture, true believers ascending to heaven, was also mocked when it didn't happen, with photos showing clothing left behind.
But if it had happened, it might have looked like this.
When May 21st came and went, camping revised the date to 5 months later.
At that time, the whole world will be destroyed.
Eye-rolling reporters got a tongue lashing from a supporter.
You can't just turn your cameras on him when you have taken and run with this and you love this story because it's good for you.
Who can resist end-of-the-world stories with end-of-the-world parties? Camping wasn't young. He was 92 when his radio network said he passed on to glory this past Sunday after suffering from a fall last month. He did eventually apologize for his prediction, saying, "We tremble before God as we humbly ask him for forgiveness for making that sinful statement. His own reports of his death were always premature."
Yeah, okay, Boomer. I mean, so, and by the way, this is a pretty common phenomena in cults, right? We have this with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I believe Jehovah's Witnesses have had 4 failed end times predictions, if I'm remembering correctly. So what we're getting at here is that the psychological motivation for an individual who has his paradigm shook does not immediately just fold to the contrary facts. Everybody, even normie science men, have caught on to this, right? With cognitive bias, right? We know about this. So there we go. So when we look at Fatima and we see that in the traditional Catholic circles, what happens is that this kind of becomes de facto a new revelation, right? In terms of divine revelation. Now, I know that Roman Catholics will say it is not officially dogma. It's not officially dogma. Okay, but it is treated this way in praxis. And why would it be treated this way in praxis if there wasn't a more fundamental problem in the ethos of traditional Roman Catholicism, namely the number 1, heterodox theology, and number 2, heterodox praxis, seeking out signs and wonders. What does Jesus say about a generation that seeks signs and wonders? I wonder. Do you remember? A wicked and adulterous generation seeks signs and wonders, and no sign will be given to it but that of the sign of Jonah. What's the sign of Jonah? It is a type of Christ. Jonah is a type of Christ who, when going into the belly of the whale, is a type of Christ's descent into Hades. Jesus explains that, I think in Matthew 12, where he says that Jonah was a type of the Son of Man. As the Son of Jonah was in the heart of the beast for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. That's the sign of Jonah. And if you remember, when on multiple instances where there's requests for Jesus to do a miracle, right? And now, and I'm going to explain the place of miracles in a minute. But if you remember, he says in the story of Abraham's, the rich man and Lazarus, Abraham's bosom, right? When the rich man dies, he goes into Hades, to the bad part of Hades. He requests Father Abraham, which is the intercession of saints, by the way. He says, Abraham, Father, help me. And he says, I can't help you. There's a big chasm between us. And he says, Lord, to Jesus, let me come back and speak to my brothers, lest they come to this place. Does Jesus say, yes, if one rise from the dead, they will believe? No. The rich man says that. If one rise from the dead, they'll believe. Do a miracle and we'll believe. How many times do they say, you claim to be the Messiah, do a miracle for us and we'll believe? Like it's a trick, right? What is Jesus' response? Even though one rise from the dead, they will not believe. Why? Because the problem isn't the facts, the evidences. It's their heart, hardened hearts. Jesus says they have the scriptures. They have Moses and the prophets. They could go read Moses and the prophets and see the predictions, the prophecies. And if they were interested and wanted to know if the religion is true, they would search those texts to see if the prophecies were fulfilled. And that would be the evidence that would be sufficient. But he says, if they're not going to listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not believe though one rise from the dead and stand in front of their face. This is the whole message of the life of Israel. How many great works and signs did God do for Israel? And yet they hardened their heart in the wilderness. How many miracles? And yet they hardened their heart. This is a constant theme and message, especially in the minor prophets. So no, mere miracles don't do anything unless the people are already at least opened or primed to believe or have faith, and thus have their faith confirmed and strengthened. Or if they're open, they can help. But a miracle, a sign, a wonder itself cannot be the ultimate determiner. It can help. But let's take messianic prophecies. Having debated hundreds of atheists over the years and having pointed out that, well, if you do want an evidence, using Jesus' own example, of the truth of the Bible, how about dozens of messianic prophecies? Now, I'm sure you guys have heard many atheists, many debates, you probably have these same discussions yourself. What does every atheist do when you start going to messianic prophecies? Oh, that doesn't mean that. Oh, that text is not about that. Oh, you're just twisting the text. Oh, that's a lie. Oh, that verse is not, that's a corrupted text. Oh, the Jews don't believe your view. Of course, none of those are actually good objections, but that's what every atheist does. Why? Because he is not approaching the messianic prophecies unless God's at work in his heart, which could be happening, right? Unless he's open to it. Maybe some people are, but typically speaking, when you initially sort of begin the dispute with a, committed atheist, he's not going to care about, you can put 1,000,000 prophecies before him that are clear as day. Daniel 9. Oh, Daniel 9 doesn't mean that. Oh, you're misinterpreting it. Why? Because it's not about facts and evidences. It's not seeing the evidences, it's seeing as. And he will see them as anything other than the confirmation of Christianity. Because he has a motivation, a desire to, Romans 1, suppress the truth and unrighteousness. So the problem is not evidences or lack of facts or lack of knowledge. It's that man's fallen. That's the problem. CIA psychological warfare operations in Chile, Nicaragua, and Jamaica. Now, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 guesses to what kind of apparitions they might have used. What do you guess? What is your guess that the CIA might have used? What kind of an apparition might these Catholic countries be susceptible to? I wonder what?